Well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today and celebrating our last event of Campus Sustainability Month. We're very happy that you all are joining us today. We have a fabulous lineup of speakers. Yona Sipos from UW Seattle, Tyson Kemper from UW Bothell, and Nedralani Logotala from UW Tacoma. So thank you to all three of our speakers for being here, and we will start with Yona.
Thank you so much, Torin, and thank you to the Sustainability Office for organizing this forum. I'm very happy to be here and also to have the opportunity to learn about food systems across our three campuses. All right, let's get started. But in order to begin, I'd like to take a moment to ground this presentation in an acknowledgement that food systems, which is the topic of today, are inextricably tied to planetary and population health. And part of this is acknowledging the original inhabitants of this land. For the University of Washington, those original inhabitants who are still here today include Coast Salish tribes and bands. It's also very important within food systems, especially to acknowledge the knowledge, skills, and labor of First Peoples, as well as the broader BIPOC communities and others who have and continue to enable food systems in this particular place. For our time together today, I'll spend a little bit of time introducing myself and then introducing food systems, and particularly the food systems, nutrition, and health major. And then we'll focus most of our time on the food systems capstone. So as Torin mentioned, my name is Yona Sipos, and I'm an assistant teaching professor at the University of Washington, Seattle School of Public Health, and specifically within the food systems, nutrition, and health major. And that's a relatively new major, although there was a lot of work leading up to it. And it launched in the winter of 2019. In addition to my teaching roles at the university, I'm involved in a few other great organizations and units that I wanted to share. I'm the co-chair of the University of Washington Seattle Farm Advisory Committee, a member of the Center for One Health Research, looking at the intersection between One Health and food systems. And I'm a new member of a multi-campus university research collaborative called Menus of Change. And then in addition to that, I'm also a mom and a partner and a gardener and a lover of food and all the things that make me a full human being. And I would welcome the opportunity to learn about you and who's in the audience today. And so I invite you to chat a little introduction, if you'd like, into the chat box. So what do we mean by food systems? Well, food systems comprise multiple interacting and interdependent systems. So you can see here that biological and economic systems combine to enable agriculture. Health and politics support social systems, which rely on food systems as an outcome of all of these interacting systems. So in addition to this perspective, we also offer the following diagram of food systems as a way to guide our students through their study of food systems here in our major. So this graphic here is from the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, showing that food systems encompasses the food supply chain on the left, from production through to processing and transportation, all the way to food environments where we access food as consumers who have particular diets, and then resulting in nutrition and health outcomes, as well as other impacts that are social, economic, and ecological in nature. And all of this is, of course, enabled by labor and ecological systems and impacted by multiple drivers listed up at the top, including biophysical, technological, political, economic, sociocultural, and demographic drivers that interact also with the policies and programs dictated by, for example, global agendas like the Sustainable Development Goals. So what we've done for our major is to actually map our courses onto this depiction of food systems so that our students sort of see where they are in the study of this complex web of interacting systems. You can see that in addition to the introductory courses in food systems, the students, as they move through into their senior studies, have an opportunity to investigate sustainability and resilience of food systems thinking, food policy, in addition to a host of electives and other topics that they're able to dig into. Toward the end, or right at the end of their studies, students have the opportunity to participate in the food systems capstone. This is a culminating experience for our senior students who are majoring in food systems, nutrition, and health. And it's conducted in partnership with food system leaders within Seattle, King County. The Food Systems Capstone has been offered twice. It was launched in the spring of 2020. So we've offered it twice so far, 2020 and 2021. And we will continue to offer it in 2022, although we'll have 2 offerings in both the winter and the spring, because we have a lot of students who are clamoring to be involved in this opportunity. And I should say that I have been the instructor for both food system capstone offerings up until now, and I'll be joined by a new faculty, Alyssa Billfield, who will also be teaching food systems capstone in subsequent years. So what do we hope that our students are going to get out of the food systems capstone experience? Well, after they complete it, we are confident that our students are able to apply a food systems approach to their learning and research, that they will have engaged in methods used to conduct food systems research. They will be able to develop recommendations and articulate them. They will appreciate professional opportunities in food systems, nutrition, and health. And very importantly, that they'll be able to articulate the means by which social inequities and racism generated by power and privilege are embedded within food systems, and through that undermine health. And this last learning objective is one that also maps to a learning objective or competency for the School of Public Health as a whole. So we have our students work in teams in order to accomplish and work toward these learning goals. And they work in teams of usually about 5 students, sometimes 4, sometimes 6, but usually 5. And they work on community identified, regionally based food system projects that relate to an overarching theme. And over the quarter, our quarters are of course 10 weeks, and over that time students consult with and refine and report back to their community partner, and they do so with guidance and support from the instructor and the teaching team. And students work toward a variety of types of outcomes, and these can include literature, program reviews, but also surveys of programs from elsewhere, educational materials, and other resources that may be of interest and that have been identified as being of interest by the community partners. So what has our theme been the last couple of years? And this theme will actually continue for at least the next year. The theme so far has been focusing on growing resilient and equitable food systems within Seattle, King County. And this theme highlights the need and opportunity to plan for disruptions that we're already experiencing, to plan for disruptions, shocks, and uncertainty within the Seattle, King County, Washington food system. And we acknowledge that there are uneven and inequitable health burdens of impact on Black, Indigenous, and people of color or BIPOC communities. We are already experiencing disruptions here, and these include COVID-19 and climate-related shocks, wildfire smoke, heavy snowfall, flooding, potentially earthquakes. And so we have a lot to be concerned about here, and it's good to have upstream focuses that can encourage adaptations and that also have a goal of advancing population health. So what do the student projects actually look like? Well, here's a list, and you can see a smattering of some of these project titles that student teams have worked on. And you can see the complete list as well as some further description on the website listed here. You will see that some of the projects are very specific. So for example, identifying or creating actually a guide to local food for immigrant senior meal sites. And then they can also be quite broad. So partnering with the City of Seattle to work toward an updated food action plan that is focused on growing a more resilient and equitable food system within Seattle. So our projects really span the gamut and are really driven by our community partners and what they have identified as needs. So who are our community partners? Well, here are examples of many of the community partners that we've worked with. And you can see that our community partners may include representatives from food system related community-based organizations, local or county governments, tribal governments, social enterprise, other stakeholders as well, who are involved in the food system. And the way we approach these partnerships is by using an anti-racist approach to critical community engaged scholarship modeled after living systems. And I'm smiling because that's kind of a mouthful. Critical community engaged scholarship is a particular form of community engaged scholarship that is informed by critical theory, including anti-racist and other anti-oppressive theories, asset-based understandings of community, and an explicit focus on and commitment to justice. And the way we prepare students for that is we participate in a modified 21-day racial equity habit building challenge. And that is a program that's run out of Food Solutions New England, which is a multi-state food systems network that engages in and sponsors this annual 3-week or 21-day challenge in building habits for racial equity, that support racial equity. And so there are resources, there are activities, and we incorporate those into our capstone classes in order to prepare students to do the type of critical community engaged scholarship that is also required to support these partnerships over time. And I'll just end there by saying that when I go to work with community partners, I ask them, what's on your wish list? What would you love to explore, but you may not have time or resources to do that? But what are some ideas you have that might benefit from some of the energy and enthusiasm and real sincere desire to contribute positively that our students bring to this work? I also invite partners to participate in this project for 1 or more years. So there's a lot of flexibility and inclusion. And as of last year, we were able to offer a small honoraria for community partners. And so with all of that, I hope I've given you just a little bit of a taste of our food systems capstone at the University of Washington Seattle campus. And I'm really looking forward to learning about what's happening on our other campuses as well. Thank you so much. Sorry if I spoke too quickly. And I'm happy to take questions, but I think that we'll probably keep them to the end, if that's Torin.
Yeah, questions at the end is perfect. So yeah, if participants want to just write your questions down and then make sure you know who you wanted to ask your questions to, we'll do that at the end. And then let's move on. Thank you so much, Yona. That was really interesting. Let's move on to Tyson. Tyson, take it away.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Yona. That was great. My name is Tyson Kemper, and I'm coming to you from the beautiful University of Washington Bothell campus. I'm sorry, this is going to be a lot more low tech than Yona's. I do not have slides, so this image is what you're going to have to deal with for the next 10 minutes. I apologize, but I'll try to be engaging in my conversation with you, at least a one-sided conversation. And we can talk after. So I'm the ground supervisor here on campus. I've been here about 15 years. Growing up, I was subject to my father rototilling the large vegetable garden that we had at our house's property every spring. He'd do so in rubber boots and nothing else. And then there was the rock picking out of the tilled soil that my brothers and sister and I would do as well. So exposed to this whole process of what it means to grow your own food from an early age. When I came to own my own house and have children of my own, it was something that I got back into in a consistent manner. And I've been growing food with my kids and my family since they were very, very young, and do it with my clothes on. I do live in suburbia, and do a lot of this gardening on the street side. So it helps with the connection with the neighbors and things like that too. But have really come to value the practice of growing your own food as a critical skill. And even if you don't grow your own food, to have within your being the understanding of where food comes from is, I think, so important to our connection with the world around us as human beings, and certainly as students involved in a university scholarly study to find solutions to problems in this world. Having those connections to our place in this space is so important. So that being said, I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the edible landscapes that we've created here on campus to provide some of those connections to the campus population and to the learning here. We have 4 locations on campus that are primarily focused on edibles and on food. The first being an apple orchard with about 24 apple trees. They're an old Dutch variety. That orchard was actually part of the design of the campus as planned when it was being developed 21 years ago. It is adjacent to, we call it the Chase House. It's where I am right now. It's a historic house. It's on the National Registry of Historic Places. It was where one of Bothell's first doctors lived with his family. And so this orchard put adjacent to this property really kind of ties back to that 19th century living, where there were many more food sources within the yards and landscapes of people then. It also gives this historic place a little touch of humanity in an otherwise very institutionalized space, which is our campus with huge buildings and parking garages. It supports, the trees are so now 25 plus years old. They produce heavily. They support a lot of foraging with the campus community. And they also supply us a lot of apples for our annual fall apple press event, which we do on the promenade. And it's a free give and take of labor and juice and conversation. It's a fantastic feature of campus. And it was, I'm glad that we can touch back to when campus was created and have a human-centric, food-focused landscape within the campus to kind of build upon. Campus, before it was acquired by the university, was a farm, a cattle ranch, actually. So there is a history of farming and ranching on this site as well. And I like to let that bubble up and become kind of part of the fabric of what defines this campus, and certainly part of the story of our history. So another place that we have on campus, somewhat related to the orchard at the Chase House, which is just apple trees, is a food forest. And that, different in the sense that a food forest is a mixture of different species of fruiting trees and shrubs. It's also much more diverse in the plant variety and structure. So an orchard is typically lawn with trees growing out of it, essentially. And all the trees are typically of one kind of tree, so they can be easily maintained, all in one way. The food forest is dramatically different in that all the trees are different, all the shrubs are different. There's not just turf grass, but most of it is meant to resemble a deciduous forest community of plants, an ecosystem, really. One where all of these different creatures are supported, the birds and the insects as well as the humans. It is also different in that it really improves itself over time, growing and becoming more complex and inviting more and more layers of function and diversity within it. All the while being in the center of campus and a really engaging and enterable landscape in which the human, the campus community, can interact with it in a really three-dimensional way as they enter into it and envelops them. It was championed by Cascadia College, which is a college, community college that shares campus with UW-Bothell. Very unique and interesting relationship that we have. So it was championed by them. They had a fairly boring, unused, grassy area in the core of their campus, and wanted to invigorate that space. They're really concerned with providing opportunity for experiential learning. And so I pitched a handful of ideas to different groups: student group, faculty, group of staff, the leadership committee, the student body leadership on the Cascadia campus. And far and away, the most excited that these groups got, each and every one of them, was this idea of developing a space where food was prominent. They all saw that as an opportunity to engage the landscape where there's not necessarily that clear opportunity in a more traditionally landscaped college campus that's just really concerned with beauty or other priorities of just gathering space and things like that. So it was really interesting to see. It was a project that the grounds team had really wanted to start on for quite a while, and we were thinking of very much smaller scale. Food forests are really built on this idea of these planting guilds, and you can have a guild as small as a single tree. So it's a single tree providing canopy and tree structure. Again, thinking about a deciduous forest ecosystem under which there are shrubs in the understory of these trees. Maybe there's vines growing up the trees as they get older. There's a collection of perennial plants below and among the shrubs, and then annuals that fill in and move within that. And then a really nice, healthy soil that does not go through the seasonal cycle of tillage and things like that. So you're developing these soil communities over time. All the while producing, you're choosing the plants for these systems that are functioning ecologically, but you're choosing them with humans in mind, in that they all provide food, or if not food, then a direct function to keeping the food plants happy and healthy. So attracting beneficial insects and pollinators that would then create a more vibrant fruiting tree. So we were thinking much more smaller scale and starting with a guild or two in campus. But here we have Cascadia offering up probably about 1/8 of an acre plot right in the core of campus. It's been a fantastic experiment. It's one of the most talked about landscapes on campus, one of the most engaged in landscapes on campus, providing all sorts of learning opportunities right outside the front door of Cascadia, and also adjacent to University of Washington. There's a lot of UW students and faculty that use it as well. A really surprising thing happened. Totally unintentional connections were being made in this space. I do a lot of outreach in the space as well. Anything from just a basic tour of campus to specifically, let's talk about the food forest and how it functions. And every class, there's of course people with different backgrounds coming from different places of the world, or whose heritage originates elsewhere. So the food forest is unique in that none of the plants that the trees and shrubs that we chose there, or the trees particularly that we chose, are the apple, cherry, pear, the things that you walk into a grocery store and see. We really went out of our way to choose things that were regionally appropriate for sure, that do well here, but were more peripheral, have historical use, or are used and grown commercially in other parts of the world. So our climate really lends itself to Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe, say, for plant species. And so we have all of these cross-cultural connections happening in this food forest as we're talking about these plants that people then recognize from either their childhood or from meals that their parents made, or things that their father has always planted in their yard and cultivated from the land that they came from, and completely unintended, yet a beautiful, beautiful moment, and I guess thing that happens around food. And I feel it traveling. I mean, I travel with my eye towards culinary experiences for sure, but there is this really deep connection that people have with food, with their culture. And I find that folks are really more open to share about themselves, about their beliefs and their feelings and their passions when you mix in a little bit of food. So that's been a really interesting thing that I see happening continually within the food forest. It's also a space, along with our entire campus in general. We're really focused on habitat creation for wildlife, creating functional ecosystems in general. Using native species and thinking about water flow through campus, things like that. There's a Cascadia College UW-B research project that has really started to key in on these edible landscapes as being also really important for pollinators as well. So there's a lot of activity around that, and we've realized through their research, and in large part on a more traditional like farm-like setting where you're growing row crops, they've really informed us of the importance of the way we manage these landscapes really has great effect to all these other peripheral users besides humans, and have found that these food landscapes that are managed to, like the food forest, to function on an ecosystem scale, do a great job of supporting pollinators as well. So also a residual, we're seeing just more and more residual positive effects of these types of food systems. Another space that we have on campus are these perennial herb beds, essentially, and we have several of them on campus. And they're going to show up in spaces that more typically would be perennial border planted with flowers that are beautiful and attractive for the human users of the landscape. We found that these herb gardens, these perennial herb gardens, function in just the same way. They are undeniably beautiful, and we organize the plants in aesthetically pleasing ways. But there's these other layers happening that we can now speak to and that people are exposed to. These layer of use of food, of nutrition, the flower types that these herbs produce have not been manipulated in the same ways that a lot of landscape plants have been manipulated, in that they were bred for bigger, more beautiful flowers that are attractive to humans. All of these flowers are still they're all oftentimes much smaller. They're really, really functional in terms of providing for the pollinators with the nectar, with the pollen and those types of things. So you have this, we've discovered that this layer of this perennial herb edible landscape is happening as well. Another major piece of this edible campus puzzle that we have been knitting together is the campus farm. And that is doing a lot of things. It's providing 8, 9, 10 raised beds where kind of traditional row cropping can be done. And that's row cropping by growing annual plants, carrots, broccoli, green beans, zucchini in these beds, and clearing them in the winter, redoing it again in the spring. The modular nature of the the raised beds really lends itself well to being able to offer these distinct spaces for student groups to take on for a season and to get their hands dirty and to try their, hand at growing their own food, experiencing all the things that revolve around that. Same with being able to provide these distinct spaces for biology classes, for sustainability focused classes, for all sorts of growing as well. Another factor taking place in the farm is a hedgerow. So this is going to be peripheral to the farm, thinking about these sustainable ideas when we're talking about agriculture in general, is that you have your food growing fields, but what makes these farms so much more sustainable and actually so much more productive in a lot of ways is having these wild natural areas peripheral to them. It both does a great thing for water quality when you're adjacent to streams and lakes and things by providing a buffer, but it's also this reservoir of beneficial insects and again, pollinators and birds that can inhabit these fringe areas and then also move within this more traditional agricultural system that the farm provides and do a lot of pest control and do a lot of pollinating. And frankly, just make the environment that feel that much more alive for the users. And then there's also a more traditional orchard there. That's where we're going to find our cherry trees and our plum trees and our apple trees and the pears, things that we're so much more familiar with here in the Northwest and certainly in America as far as grocery store fare. So it's not as challenging as the food forest, which is filled with things like medlar and jujube, pawpaw, goji, gumi berries, mulberries, quince, these things that a lot of people don't have a lot of experience with eating ever in their daily life. So again, that's a great resource to have on campus is exposure to these novel things that people don't come in contact with on a daily basis. So all of these things collectively, I mean, in my mind, the campus landscape is meant to function at its highest level if it's providing learning opportunities for students that are pursuing their education. Also a safe space, an inspiring space, a diverse space, and being public land, also a space that is, providing for wildlife habitat and just habitat in general and functioning ecosystems. The beautiful thing about these edible landscapes, though, is that they're providing not only for wildlife, but this idea of human habitat as well. And as classes are learning about sustainability, learning about food security, learning about equity, learning about ecology in the classroom, providing these spaces on campus where when they leave the classroom and they enter into the campus environment, all of these aspects that come up in their education are represented in some, at least small way within the campus landscape to really inform their learning in a whole new way. I know the faculty find these spaces really valuable in being able to provide really cheap, really fast and easy field trip and experiential learning opportunities right here on campus. They're so much more engaging to these groups because lots of other pieces of the campus landscape is a lot more of stand and look and talk about it, even when you're getting out of the classroom. These edible landscapes really lend themselves to entering into these spaces, touching and engaging and sharing and, and even consuming in these spaces. So they offer a different experience and a valuable, really valuable teaching tool for the campus users. And there's also, we don't go out of our way to grow food for for the pantries. But each year we're providing several hundred pounds of fresh produce and fruit to the pantry systems here on campus. Just goes to show that, I mean, I see all this public land and what you choose to do with the public land being such an important decision to be made, and that we could do so much more. We could do so much better with how we use our public land and how it supports both the community that occupies that land, but also peripheral communities as well. So these food systems on campus that are within the campus landscape are, I hope, planting the seed with the students that are learning concepts that they can take out into the world and apply on much bigger scales to solve the world's problems. It's so nice to know that these edible landscapes are a solution to a lot of problems, and that they're right outside the classroom door of the students. So that is all that I have to say at this moment. Happy to talk more about it with the questions upcoming.
Awesome. Thank you, Tyson. That was great. I was very interested. Anyway, so
wait till you see the pictures next time, Torrin.
Oh, great.
Then, ooh.
I can't wait. Cool. So Nedralani, you're up next.
Thank you. Thank you, Tyson. Thank you, Yona, for your presentations. I learned a lot. I'm over here just writing a lot of notes and looking at how much more we could do here at UWT with our landscape in our public spaces. So thank you. You got my wheels turning up here. So hello, everyone. Tala Falava. My name is Nedralani Logotala. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program support supervisor here at our Center for Equity and Inclusion. And I'm just happy to share space with you all. So I have a presentation just to talk about how our pantry has operated, a little history of how it started. And then I have some data points to kind of share with you all, both before the pandemic, currently, and within the pandemic too, and how we kind of transition things to have this operation service still available for students. So here is our mission statement. It reads, the pantry exists to provide free, supplemental, nutritious, and culturally relevant food, as well as hygiene items to any UWT student who needs it. So currently right now, we are offering perishable and non-perishable food items. So we do have a fridge and a freezer, which we're very excited about because that was a long time coming. And then we also have hygiene items available too for students. So, you know, that ranges from period products to basic toiletry items, baby products, as well as we know some of our students are coming, you know, with family members. And so thinking about this resource holistically with our students, thinking about, you know, they're not just coming for themselves, you know, what are other factors that may play a part in their journey here, and what are ways that we can help them. So our little history of us, we started back in 2013. There was a campus research survey that was conducted by one of our very own faculty members, Dr. Christine Stevens. And with this research, she found that about 32% of our students were facing some form or level of food insecurity. And so this number is actually pretty on par with the national average of college students who were facing food insecurity as well. So that said a lot. And that, and with that too, she saw that about 14% of our students were also facing housing insecurity. So with all that information, 2016 is when we finally established our pantry here under our office. And since then, we've just been doing a lot of educating around what food insecurity looks like and how prevalent it is on college campuses. I think that was the biggest challenge that we saw. And I'll show you some data points after this of kind of showing how the change in our culture here at campus kind of changed since learning more about this. In 2018, we received the Kresge grant, which helped us supported us in providing more culturally relevant foods for our students, and not just for UWT, but the greater Pierce County. So we partnered with the Nourish Pierce County, which is a local nonprofit food organization, one of our biggest ones here in Pierce County that distributes food to other local food banks. And so we partnered with them to work with this on providing, more culturally relevant foods, working with our farmers, what are ways that we can talk with our communities that are already thriving here with their own native plants and vegetables and produce, and what are ways that we can talk to our farmers and just, get that going so that way it can benefit all of us. So we're having these conversations, and it's really shaped the way that we operate our pantry. And so these are just some of our guiding questions that that help us frame the work that we're doing. The first is, who are we serving? Our students here at UWT is very diverse. We serve a very diverse student population. And so keeping that in mind about the resources that we're providing for them, we want to make sure that it's reflective of their needs. This third question right here, how can we create a sense of belonging through food services? And so Tyson, you kind of hinted to this in your presentation around, when students see food that they resonate with, that bring back memories from their childhood or for their communities, that's a one way that really keeps our students here, or makes them feel like this institution was thinking of them, or really care for their not just for themselves academically, but holistically, like we talked about. One example I love to share as a Pacific Islander, I was also a student here at UWT, and I graduated in 2017. And so, it was the first year when the pantry was open, and it was a very different vibe. Like if I saw items in there like coconut milk, that's a big staple in my community. If I were to see that in the pantry, I would have, I think I would have thought twice, like, wow, this institution is really thoughtful about what I need as a student, and what my communities need. And so that's something that's really been driving us to think about and what we are providing in the pantry, the types of foods, and making sure that it's providing some sense of belonging here on campus. And then this last question, what are different ways we can provide access to food? You all know within the pandemic, it was very hard, and there was a lot of folks facing a lot more hardships, and a lot of that dealt with meeting our basic needs. And so we wanted to make sure that this was a big priority point in our service, to make sure that we are providing other ways that students can access it. So I will talk a little bit about that in a couple slides, but just these are the questions that we're thinking about as we're doing this work. So over the years, as I mentioned, I just wanted to share a little bit here. Looking at the time, okay. So 2016 is when we opened it. We had a little bit over 800 total visits in the pantry. And you can see the next year, we just escalated up to 2,000 visits. And so this is where I was talking about the education around food insecurity, talking with our faculty members and our staff members to look out for signs of students who may be, facing other issues, if they're, not focusing in class, or if they're missing class. These were big things that we found in our research from Dr. Christine Stevens early on, that students were just, missing classes, or having to cut their meals so they can get to class. And so all these factors put into play, and educating folks around how prevalent this is, and it's a real issue. Started seeing a lot more folks putting on their syllabi, putting it in their handbooks and their manuals, just to share this resource and make sure that students are aware of it. So we've been seeing that, as you can tell here in 2020, we had a decline because of the pandemic, but I'm so happy to say that, we were able to still have this resource available. Just a little quick note here too, on this little scale, the way that we've been operating and keeping track of our inventory is just by how much food is getting distributed to our students. As many pantries, we're not always clear on what we're going to receive in the pantry. So having a itemized list of what we have in our inventory isn't ideal for us or realistic. And so we're able to track how much food we're giving out to students. And so we've seen that we gave around over 9,000 pounds of food in 2019 and 2020 academic year. And then this past year, we were able to distribute around 10,000 pounds. So that's a lot. I know the numbers of students don't necessarily mark that, but it also speaks to us wanting to give more to students in this time of need as well. So we were able to increase the amount of items that we gave to students too. So a little bit about the pandemic. Accessibility, like I mentioned, was our first priority. So we switched to online orders only, but students were able to opt in to pick up in person or have it delivered. And so with this, we understand that a lot of our students, our commuter students here in Washington, coming to UW Tacoma, and so not everyone lives local or in our dorms. So we wanted to make sure that we were thinking about that. What are ways that we can increase our access to the pantry, given that some students may have transportation, may not have transportation to come to campus. And so, or the fact that just coming to campus for this resource and not because there's classes is a whole, you know, that played a big part too. And so we had this awesome partnership with AT&T after their generous sponsorship to each of our pantries. And with that, we did a pilot delivery program with them where we only delivered pantry orders to students living within 10 miles of campus. But again, we started that conversation, like we have students living as far as Seattle or Auburn or Kent or as far as Olympia. And so once our pilot program ended with AT&T, we reached out to our staff and faculty here on campus for volunteers to deliver food. And so I was happy to say that we had over 100 volunteer signups since we went into the pandemic. And we unfortunately had to end it this year because everyone's returned back to work. So, you know, but that was a great resource and thing that we were able to do for our students at that time. So just some data points, we were able to serve over 600 students from that time when we went into the pandemic in late March into the April, all the way till December 20th, 2020. And with that too, you'll see right here, we have payroll deductions. Our pantry is sustained by the goodness of our staff and faculty and community members, by sponsorships from local organizations. And so just through payroll deductions, so staff and faculty are able to put a little bit from their paychecks. We were able to raise over $36,000 in that 2019-2020 academic year. And then within just last year's, that was around $35,000. So I just wanted to say this just to highlight that, you know, this work was a collective work in supporting our students over the pantry. The financial support has definitely helped us because again, we don't have a line budget for this where, you know, we're guaranteed money every year. So it's helpful to know that we're getting support from faculty and staff and other community members to keep this resource going. So now that we're returned back in person, we had to transition some things. So no more deliveries, but we have returned back to in-person shopping. So we allow students to come in once a week and, you know, fill out one intake form one time, and then they can just come back every week after that with just their email and student ID. So it's been really helpful, but we also recognize that some students don't feel comfortable still being back on campus or just being in tight spaces. Our pantry isn't that big. So we do still offer online order pickups for students. And with this, we offered 6 food bag options for our students. And I just wanted to highlight halal right here. This food option was something that was just included in our bag options this past summer. After talking with our students, specifically our Muslim students here on campus, and knowing that we serve a lot of Muslim students here, we also wanted to make sure our services were also meeting their needs too. And so having a food option, halal, that resonates with students, this plays back into that sense of belonging. If students were to see a halal option in the pantry, you know, just like a light bulb that pops in their head, like, oh, okay, like the institution is really thinking about me. So just thinking about that, and we're still changing things as we go, as we're learning. And so it's been great. This is our campus partners and community partners that we've partnered with in the past. Our biggest one, like I mentioned, is Nourish Pierce County. We also partner with our campus garden here over here. And so we've been able to get fresh produce over the summertime. We just recently got a greenhouse too. So we're excited to hopefully provide more produce all year long. in the meantime, we partner with Costco too to purchase some food items in our pantry, and then also with classes. I think Tyson, you mentioned too, and Yona, like just being able to provide a learning experience outside of the classroom is really important. And so we've done that in providing ways to help shape this conversation around food insecurity, accessibility. We've had students come in and work with us and helping us fix our processes and our technology systems that we're using too. So there's so many ways for us to get connected with students that we have done. And so that's something too that we are always open for. We're currently working right now with these two partnerships on the right. St. Leo's Food Connection is a local organization here who also distributes free food to food pantries as well as families in need. And so working with them, they're right up the road from us, so very convenient to get food here. And looking forward, we've done a lot of partnerships with them in the past with the institution, but not specifically at the pantry. So looking forward for this. And then some of you all might be familiar with Northwest Harvest too, as they are one of the largest organizations here in Washington State and have supported a lot of food pantries too. So working on working with some things with them too to help our pantry as well. I think that is it for me. If y'all have any questions, I'm gonna go turn it back over to Torin to end things, and yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Nedralani. That was really interesting. So it looks like we do have a question from Ashley in the audience. And it says, how does the UW Tri-Campus source their food for their food pantries? As a state-funded institution, what does that look like?
I can go first. Thank you, Ashley. So I kind of mentioned this. We do not get any state funds to support the pantry. And that's been a big challenge that we've been facing here, just because we know how important having resources like this are for students. And so that's still an ongoing conversation. I guess I'm gonna just leave it there. It's still an ongoing conversation, but thank you for pointing that out. And we look forward to finding other ways to really connect the institution with services like this.
Yeah. I'm happy to add a little bit, Torin. First of all, thank you both so much, Tyson and Nedralani. I really appreciated those presentations. It made me think about other activities at the UW Seattle campus, and that we can maybe keep learning about each other's work, because I think we also have like pantry. We have a UW pantry at the Seattle campus and face the same funding issues, Nedralani, that you described so well. And so it's a combination, as far as I know, of fundraising. I'm not sure that we have payroll deductions that are funding. Do you know, Torin? But I know that it's a lot of donations, it's a lot of fundraising, and we go to visit the campus pantry and engage with them through our Nutrition 303 individual to population health food systems class, and also go around to other campus food system sectors and stakeholders. And the farm and the pantry are starting to fundraise together, because neither of those campus resources that are located on state campuses have secure funding. And so this is definitely an important issue to spotlight.
Absolutely.
I have a quick question for Tyson. I just was curious you mentioned how sometimes with the food forest, there might be foods that people aren't as familiar with, or at least, from kind of the Western culture, people might not be as familiar with. And I was just curious how much you kind of maybe if there's any education to people, either signage there or, other ways to let people know what is available in that food forest and how they might be able to utilize it, or if it's more just the passive and let people kind of discover it and figure it out on their own.
It's certainly started as a very passive project. So much of the landscape is just meant to be discovered, and I kind of I hold that view dear. And then through education, things become revealed to people. I also definitely understand how you can engage a community with signage. Although I've certainly experienced kind of sign pollution or a little bit of sign overload. We've reached a middle ground in the food forest for a student project. They researched all of the trees and primary shrubs within the food forest and created signs for them. So, and they're very simple signs. They're not QR coded or anything like that. It's really meant to give very basic information that then people can, if interested, take and Google on their phone or whatever. So just common and scientific names on each of the primary species within the food forest. And of course, I do a lot of education and get requested to do a lot of class tours. And I see that you teach a few people and they tend to share the information with others. So there's certainly, through all of those things, there's a kind of a campus culture that's growing in terms of knowledge sharing.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else in the audience have any questions for our fabulous speakers today? Nope, looks like not. Well, thank you so much to Yona, Tyson, and Nedralani for your time today. Fabulous presentations, and anyone in the audience, if you have a specific question for the speakers that you remember later, just feel free to email them to myself or the sustainability at UW email address that Damon has put in the chat. Thank you, Damon. And I will be sure to send it to whichever speaker it is related to. So we'll get all your questions answered. And yeah, thanks again, everybody. Really, really appreciate your time today.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Torin. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.